Thank you, Heavenly Dad. You could say that this has something to do with the preoccupation with what is the real. The world says reality is the material, the tangible, the practice. And the economist wants to be a realist. But in order to handle the complex world, he retreats into a sort of mathematical model world of purity, where the number of assumptions are handleable and predictable. And in this simplistic model of what the real world might still be, broadly speaking, explained by, he works out various consequences of various actions. And then comes the tricky bit. He may now advise accordingly. And the decision maker, who we might classify, say, as the political side of society, comes in and says, how reliable is this? I know you're the expert, but you've retreated into pure forms, thought, and simplistic models. Have we got good reason to suppose that, for instance, your assumptions are reasonable? A reasonable simplification that won't totally change the outcome of all predictions, if we make them more realistic. Is the model perhaps fortuitously nonetheless useful? Can we practice in some small way to see if we can risk something bigger? And of course you can't necessarily do that, and you don't have time for these niceties anyway. So the would-be realist economist is suddenly dismissed out of hand, as he feels. And he's prided himself on being extremely rational in the way he's built his model of the economy, and thinks it'll do a better job than what the political wing of society is guessing at. And they, of course, are not in agreement because they, they may more or less trust the economists. If it's more, then they almost put the decision in the experts say, and so we're doing such and such. And when it doesn't work, of course, politically, they're up the creek with the rest of society, unless they can minimise the comeback from such their history. And regardless of the welfare to society or not, it may vitally affect their welfare if suddenly they're no longer the ones making the decision. Yes. Is there some pure form solution to this? Oh, yes. They're all as well informed as each other, political or economic stroke scientific. They're all well motivated. And goodness, they all have the same goals, but the world is not quite like that. And it's not likely to be. And perhaps in a pure form way, it's not meant to be. For instance, if we were to suppose that the pure form purpose of this universe is to prepare us for life eternal, then perhaps it's doing a very good job the way it is. Not necessarily enjoyable in itself, but worthwhile. We're back to the if it's a temporary sort of difficulty for an eternal gain, well, it has to be worth it, doesn't it? Being here. But of course you don't know that. But if you don't trust that, you may find what you're left with is very inferior, even while you're here, leave alone whether you gain life eternal. Which is my view, isn't it? Trusting in God may, in practical terms, be, by practical I mean even in worldly terms, be a much better option, whether there's life after death and whether God exists or not. The fear by the worldling is that, no, I don't think so. I could end up having a miserable life, having to do things I don't really want to do, and at the end of the day having nothing anyway. At least I could be enjoying things in the meantime. The disadvantage of such is, of course, A, we're not clear that such a view is valid either, and B, you've always got the doom of final catastrophe, death or blankness as in the future, coming closer and closer to you. And this may greatly affect your joy. And if you're reckless about the concern for such, your life may be even shorter. Of course, the spiritual way can be up the creek as well if, you've got it wrong and your God did not require you to go out and get yourself sacrificed. That can shorten life dramatically too. And then, you found, say, God didn't exist and you think, oh, what a shame, I could have hung on for a few more decades. But hanging on for a few more decades might not be that joyful with this impending doom of nothing at the end of it. And not to mention the problems of aging that tend to come physically either way. But even that isn't certain, is it? If I'm joyfully trusting in God, I may be proof, against all sorts of illnesses, be running a wonderful immune system because my thoughts and mental state are, causing the right hormones and chemicals, reactions in the body that give me a wonderful immune system and so on. At the end of the day, the great thing is we don't know what works. And in that sense, the worldling has a principle. I mean a pure form view, that it's what works is the principle that counts. And that's what he's going to try and hold to. And interestingly, if he does, and if he finds, for argument's sake, trusting in God makes him much happier than when he didn't, well, he knows the way he's going to go, doesn't he? Not only that, but if there is a God, wow, he's so done the right thing, isn't he? He's winning all the way into eternity. You say, this is awful, Marshall. This is a self-interested view of why you should follow God. Of course it is. The very notion of, do you want to be with a perfect being and infinitely happy forever? Perfectly happy, whatever it means to be best. Of course you want that. We're not saying follow God and your life's going to be a nightmare, but this is the way to go. Nobody's saying that. even when it was the most horrendous God, like the Hebrew God, who, if things don't work out too well, may have to annihilate the whole planet. I mean, God, yeah. No wonder Joshua fell on his face when he realized he was confronted with the captain of the hosts of the Lord. He was just terrified. This man, this being has all power before me. Oh dear. And then to be told, choose you this day whom you will serve. Well, didn't really have an option. I mean, he had a gun to his head, didn't he, in effect? So yes. Or should I say no, there's no way we're expecting you to devote yourself to a God that doesn't love you. On the contrary, the Jesus story is very simple. It's your heavenly dad, perfect dad. What does that say for your future? Wow. Thank you, heavenly dad. And it's a self-interest that does what? Opens you up to a communion with all life. An enlargement of self to include all. Call that selflessness if you wish, or call that the perfection of self. I know which view I take. What view do you take? Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.